Organ Donation by Natalie Montoya. Alicia Stillman lay her head on Guy Mulligan's chest and heard the heartbeat of her daughter Emily. Emily died from a severe meningitis infection at 19 years of age and was registered as an organ donor. She saved the life of Mulligan, a Michigan doctor, along with 2 other men who received her kidney and lung. This is just one example of an extraordinary life-saving story from NBC News that can only be possible with organ donation. A director for Life Sharing, Sharon Ross, explains that both the donor or the donor's family and the recipient have to agree to meet, so a meeting only happens in about 5% of cases due to the highly emotional aspect of it. Next, an overview of organ donation. First of all, what is organ donation? The exact definition of organ donation taken from the Cleveland Clinic is the process of surgically removing an organ or tissue from one person and placing it into another. In simple terms, it basically means giving up your organs to someone else for their benefit in the form of a transplant. Second, how does organ donation work? Anyone can donate despite age or medical conditions, and they can choose to be a living and/or deceased donor. Living donors can only donate limited items. They can only donate 1 kidney, 1 lobe of their liver, 1 lung, part of their pancreas, and part of their intestine. Their body can still function perfectly fine without these, but there is always a risk of complication. Deceased donors can donate anything needed. Hospitals can use kidneys, liver, lungs, pancreas, heart, intestines, corneas, and they've recently added hands and face. They can also use tissues such as heart valves, skin, bones, and tendons, along with bone marrow, blood, plasma, and platelets. Patients have the option to choose donation limitations, what they wish and do not wish to donate. What is a procedure like? According to Center for Bioethics in their Ethics of Organ Transplantation Guide, there are basically 6 steps. First of all, the doctor will make an incision in the body near the failing organ. Next, they will cut the arteries and the veins that run to the organ. After that, they will remove the organ through the incision and take the new organ and insert it into the body through the incision. Next, they will connect the new organ to the arteries and veins, and lastly, they will close the incision. Last, how do people register to be an organ donor? Each individual state has its own easy process. Here in Utah, you can sign up online at yesutah.org or in person at the DMV with a photo ID and some basic identification information. Next, some background information on organ donation. The history of organ donation taken from history.com. Early doctors such as Gasparo Tagliacozzi in the 16th century would graft skin to heal wounds faster by transplanting it from one body to another. They first practiced organ transplants on animals such as monkeys, pigs, goats, and dogs. Observations of transplant rejection appeared, and scientists studied this immune system phenomenon. Transplant rejection is basically an immune system response to the newly implanted organ. The body creates antibodies to fight it, and ultimately tries to kill it because their body doesn't recognize it and assumes it is harmful. Next, the first successful transplants. Transplants are actually fairly new because they haven't even been around for 100 years. Medical advancement has skyrocketed in the last decades. The very first organ transplant was done by Joseph Murray in 1954. He transplanted a kidney. Next was the pancreas by W.D. Kelly and Richard Lillehay in 1966. The year after that, Thomas Starzl transplanted the first liver in 1967, and the same year Christian Barnard transplanted the first heart. Several years later, the Toronto Lung Transplant Group transplanted the first lung in 1983, which was only performed 34 years ago. Next, organ donation in today's society. Approximately 116,000 patients in the U.S. are currently waiting for an organs transplant, according to the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. The top 3 transplanted organs are the kidney, liver, and heart. Organ donations are becoming an increasingly common event. Most people know somebody in their lives who have had an organ transplant or are currently needing one. About every 10 minutes, another person is in need of an organ transplant and is added to the list, yet only 80 transplants are performed per day. There have also been several movies or documentaries made about organ donation. Thank You came out in 2015, Never Let Me Go 2010, Traffic 2011, and Dirty Pretty Things in 2002. LookToTheStars.org shows that there are several huge celebrity advocates for organ donation. Kate Hudson, Brad Pitt, and Katherine Heigl are big supporters for Donate Life America. According to organdonor.gov, 95% of American adults support organ donation, but only 54% are actually registered to be one. The percent of organ donors greatly varies in each state. For example, 73% of adults aged 16 or older in Utah are organ donors, yet the national average is 54.6%. There is a waiting list set up for organ donation, and this is how it works. The United Network of Organ Sharing, or UNOS, creates a unique list every time an organ becomes available. Organdonor.org states that this list depends on the severity of illness of the patient, the length of time on the waiting list, the size compatibility of organs, the blood type, tissue type, and proximity to the donor because of time constraints on donated organs. These regional waiting lists vary on geography and population, and the national average waiting time for an organ is over a year, or about 12.3 months. Organs are not readily available today because the demand for transplant organs greatly outweighs the supply. The Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network estimates that about 20 people die per day waiting for an organ donation for their transplant. Although the rate of donors has risen in recent years, it is still not enough to cover the need. Jane Brody, a writer for the New York Times, suggests that we can increase the amount of organs for donation by persuading more people to become donors, whether living or deceased, and creating more effective hospital policies for harvesting organs, and through education to decrease fear of organ donation. There are also some costs associated with organ donation. The donor and family will not be charged for any organ donation costs, but they will have to cover any medical fees and funeral costs. The recipient and family will pay for donation-related costs, most likely using their insurance. Organ donation transplants are extremely expensive procedures. Here are some average costs. The average kidney transplant costs about $40,000. The average heart transplant costs about $150,000, and a liver transplant costs about $200,000 to $300,000. Patients receiving organ transplants also need to pay for immunosuppressant drugs. These are used to improve success rates by reducing the likelihood of tissue rejection. These cost on average $10,000 to $20,000 per year and must be taken for the remainder of life as a preventative. Organ transplant might help patients overall save money since they won't have to pay for treatments like dialysis anymore. Interestingly enough, total combined organ donation costs less than 1% of all medical costs combined, according to Ronald Mudson.